Ladies and gentlemen who are currently following our program on our YouTube channel, we always provide updates on the latest and hottest issues. The following is the detailed content according to the Jerusalem Post. Israel. When Hamas launched an attack in southern Israel on October 10th, it resulted in the deaths of 1,400 people. The Israel Defense Forces, IDF, proposed an immediate ground invasion of Gaza, and a ground offensive was planned to take place within a few days. However, several reasons have been given to explain the delay. The first and most obvious reason is that not all of the IDF's 360,000 mobilized troops were fully equipped and trained for their various missions. So the forces were not fully prepared for the offensive. Waiting too long without taking action could create anxiety and have a negative impact on morale. The second reason, considered reasonable at the time, was to allow the people of Gaza more time to evacuate before the initial weekend of conflict. About 500,000 Palestinians had evacuated from the northern part of Gaza towards the south, and this number had risen to over 700,000 people. This is an important reason to argue for waiting a bit longer to allow more civilians to evacuate. The third reason, and perhaps the most decisive one, is that the stronger the Israeli Air Force, IAF, strikes, the fewer casualties the IDF will face when launching the ground campaign. The remaining Hamas forces would be significantly weakened when the ground attack begins, with a potentially higher number of casualties than any recent Israeli incursion. In addition, there is growing concern that Hezbollah in Lebanon is waiting for most of the IDF's ground forces to enter Gaza to open a full front with the IDF in the north. While this might not deter the IDF from attacking Gaza, it may cause delays as they assess Hezbollah's intentions more thoroughly and possibly reinforce their northern presence in case the worst scenario unfolds. Furthermore, there is a deeper acknowledgement in the IDF and at the political level that the Israeli military has not carried out such a ground campaign in many decades. Rushing into Gaza without proper preparation, only to quickly satisfy public anger, might be a significant mistake. Some factors, including potential international repercussions and U.S. pressure to minimize civilian casualties, may have given Israel more time to address the Hamas issue. However, as casualties rise due to the ground offensive, there will be strong pressure from the United States and the world to halt the operation. Along with that, many sources have told the Jerusalem Post that Israel has not yet decided what will happen in Gaza after the IDF is supposed to overthrow Hamas's rule. Recently, the Israeli military continued to launch multiple new airstrikes on various targets across the Gaza Strip. The Israel Defense Forces, IDF, announced that on October 23rd, these airstrikes destroyed 320 targets belonging to Hamas and the jihadist militant groups in Gaza. Meanwhile, Palestinian medical sources reported that around 500 people have been killed or injured, with most of the casualties being civilians, including many women and children. Along the border area between Israel and Lebanon, clashes persist between the IDF and the armed Islamist group Hezbollah. On October 23rd, the IDF reported shooting down 2 explosive-laden drones originating from southern Lebanon, aiming to attack IDF positions along the border. In response, the IDF carried out artillery and drone strikes on 3 Hezbollah targets in southern Lebanon. However, there were no reports on casualties from either side. The ongoing border clashes between the IDF and Hezbollah, now in their 16th day, have resulted in numerous casualties on both sides and have the potential to escalate into a larger conflict. Meanwhile, the Israeli military is accelerating its training and preparations for a ground offensive in Gaza. In a recent statement, Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz emphasized that the ground offensive in Gaza may last for 1, 2, or 3 months. However, the ultimate victory sought is the removal of Hamas. Turkey's Minister of Health, Faiz Abiad, has announced that his country has dispatched 2 cargo planes to Gaza on October 23rd, carrying medical supplies and equipment. The cargo planes included medications, generators, medical equipment, incubators, and supplies for newborn babies. Turkey also plans to send 2 more cargo planes with essential humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip. This aid is being transported to Gaza via the Rafah border, crossing through an agreement with Egypt. Furthermore, the High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Josep Borrell, called for the swift transport of humanitarian aid to Gaza. He emphasized the need to restore access to electricity and water supplies and encourage the quick transportation of humanitarian aid. Borrell also mentioned that over 30 trucks of humanitarian aid have been allowed into Gaza from Egypt. EU member states are currently discussing a call for a humanitarian ceasefire in the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas. In the face of various opinions on the Israeli-Palestinian issue within the EU, Sweden's Foreign Minister Tobias Billström mentioned that while EU member countries are still debating the idea of a humanitarian ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas conflict, there are different ways to deliver aid to the people of Palestine in Gaza. He noted that Sweden supports the United Nations proposal for a humanitarian corridor. On October 22, Iran's Foreign Minister, Hossein Amir Abdollahian, and his Egyptian counterpart Sameh Shoukry emphasized the importance of an immediate halt to attacks on the Palestinian people and the delivery of humanitarian aid to Gaza. They stated their opposition to the demand for Palestinians to leave Gaza. Rafah is now the main border crossing for transporting humanitarian aid to Gaza, as it does not share a border with Israel, which has been under blockade. Since Israel's blockade of Gaza, Rafah has become a focal point for humanitarian relief efforts. Humanitarian convoys have been entering Gaza through the Rafah border crossing since October 21. However, despite these efforts, the quantity of humanitarian aid received by Gaza has been limited. Gaza is currently home to 2.3 million people, and has been the destination for many people seeking refuge from the conflict. Efforts are being made to provide essential supplies to the people in Gaza. Before this, on October 21, the first humanitarian aid convoys were allowed to enter Gaza. U.S. President Joe Biden also commended the developments at the Rafah border crossing, indicating commitments from Israeli officials and the Egyptian president to enable the first 20 trucks of humanitarian aid to enter Gaza. These shipments include medical supplies and food. Egypt, being the only country sharing a border with both Israel and Gaza, has had a complicated relationship with Hamas, especially since the group has its origins as an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood, which has historically clashed with the Egyptian government. Despite signing an official peace treaty with Israel in 1978, Egypt's public tends to be more supportive of the Palestinian people than its government, except for a short-lived administration led by the Muslim Brotherhood, which was toppled in 2013. After Israel's strict blockade of Gaza, Egypt's Rafah border crossing is now the only lifeline for Gaza. It is also the only feasible escape route for hundreds of thousands of Palestinians living in dire conditions in Gaza. Egypt is under significant pressure regarding the issue of allowing innocent people to cross the border to escape the Israel-Hamas conflict. However, opening the border is a challenging issue due to concerns about security and social implications, similar to Egypt's stance. Jordan, which signed a formal peace treaty with Israel in 1994, has a more complicated perspective on the Israel-Palestine issue. More than 2 million Palestinians have registered as refugees in Jordan, with most of them enjoying full Jordanian citizenship. This situation complicates Jordan's view on the matter. Israel has had concerns for a long time about facing a significant conflict on two fronts with Hamas and Hezbollah. While the long-standing political impasse and economic collapse in Lebanon have limited Hezbollah's ability to act, the situation in Gaza is different. Even though Hamas allowed Palestinian factions in Gaza to fire rockets into Israel in the past 2 weeks, it remains uncertain whether this indicates their preparations for their campaign on the ground in Gaza, or if it's just a signal of support to Hamas. Since the recent outbreak in Syria, Israel has conducted numerous significant attacks against Iran's assets in the country, mainly targeting the supply routes and weapon depots from Iran that Israel alleges are destined for Hezbollah and Hamas. Nevertheless, direct threats from Syria to Israel appear to have somewhat diminished over the past few years. Any regional response to an Israeli ground campaign could draw international attention to Iran. The nation has been repeatedly warned by Israel that it may feel compelled to intervene in the event of an Israeli attack on Gaza by land. Iran, the main rival of Israel, is accused of frequently using proxy forces to advance its intervention activities and attract the attention of international coalitions in the region. The recent attacks on U.S. interests in Iraq by pro-Iranian groups following an increase in threats against the U.S. are another sign of escalating tensions. The pro-Iranian groups, including Hezbollah, called on the U.S. to leave Iraq. Otherwise, they would face the hell of fire. Iran-backed Houthi forces in Yemen have targeted primarily oil facilities in Saudi Arabia, indicating a potential capability to reach Israel or other destinations. The capacity of these groups to threaten shipping operations in the Red Sea and the Arabian Gulf is also a significant concern. The U.S. Navy's interception of missiles and drones launched from Yemen towards Israeli targets on October 19 showed the increasing danger in the region.